Hello, nerds, and welcome to Into the Wild, your favourite wildlife and conservation podcast where we look at all things, well, wildlife and conservation.
This is a podcast of curiosity where we know we don't have all the answers.
Oh, that's my co-host Nadia, by the way.
Hi. But it doesn't really matter because we're here to learn and crucially listen to those who are affected by and closest to the issues that we as conservationists tend to pick over from our comfy living rooms.
So strap yourselves in, open up your luggles, grab a brew, and join us as we geek out over nature, share our love for wildlife, rarely take ourselves seriously, all whilst learning. Oh, and we sometimes swear. Hello, how are you?
Lovely.
Yeah?
Oh, you put your hat on backwards.
I
Is
thought
that
it
your
would be
nature
funny.
news?
No, how would that be nature news? I thought it'd be funny to see if you noticed if I turned my camera off, came back on with a hat, and to see if you noticed. But
100%.
immediately,
Well, I'm a bird watcher, aren't I? Your summer plumage has arrived.
how was your day?
Great. Coming off the back of a very hot weekend.
It was very warm, wasn't it? It was. But I know it's like, oh, it's not normal. It shouldn't be like 17, 18 degrees in March. But sorry, I didn't
Should it
enjoy
not? Should it not?
But 18 degrees is quite hot, isn't it, for March?
So my theory is the whole saying, don't cast a clout until May's out, this is going to be a new segment of our show where Ryan's like, that's not a saying, no one's
Can I
ever
just
said
stop there?
that."
Can you stop introducing new segments to the show? You do this every episode, and I'm losing track, and they never come back.
Because I think that March is meant to have the odd balmy day, which is what throws you.
Okay.
I think
Yeah,
it's fine.
Okay, it's fine. Good,
Give
because I
us it.
enjoyed it.
Great. Butterflies out. Saw my first brimstone.
Oh, you've just taken my nature highlight. Yeah, brimstone. That was it. Right, next.
You must have had more than that. Well, no, isn't that lovely that we both had that then?
Brimstone and tortoiseshell. So yeah, I had those two. That was going to be my nature highlight, but they are the flutterbys are out.
They're so lovely.
And actually, another part to my nature highlight. Sorry, I've got a very salty tear.
Oh, love.
Do you know when you like your eye waters and sometimes it's really salty? Do you ever get that?
I've always got high salt content in my tears.
Nadia Shake fun fact.
I've never had a tear and gone, weak.
Weak, nothing. Mine's like cordial.
You're all right.
Yeah, I'm going to crack on.
Okay.
I mean, we could have gone without saying this because listeners cannot see what I'm doing.
Don't let this stop you. Ryan's currently got his shirt pulled up and he's dabbing his eye in a really dramatic fashion. If I must say so.
It feels like, when you get like nature friendly and vegan friendly like shampoo, a tiny bit in your eye and you're like, and it really hurts and you're like, I don't want it tested on animals, but I can see why they do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my nature highlight is seeing brimstones and tortoiseshells, but my other nature highlight part of that is I was seeing other people on Hampstead Heath also see them and be really excited about it.
Oh, that's the best bit.
So that
of
was
the
really
news.
nice. Yeah, I walked past a couple, like just a young couple walking their dog, and they were like, "Oh my god, look, butterfly!" And I was like,
Oh, that's so lovely.
So that was nice.
I
That
had
was
like
really
a
cool.
similar but not as good experience. I was walking last week. And there was I think assuming grandparents with a child, not their parents. And the child was squatted over in the grass poking around at something. And I just got involved and I was like, ooh, what have you found? Is it something in it? Like, I really like nature. And honestly, all three of them were like, who are you? Go away. And they didn't even tell me what he was looking at. It was really awkward.
Oh, that's sad.
I know.
Yeah,
I
that's
know.
really sad. Is it always sad when it doesn't work? Isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. I thought, what he didn't realise is this is a really keen naturalist here to join in, but absolutely not.
What was your nature highlight?
I think probably the brimstone as well, and I think that's great. And it was really unexpected as well. Like, it's almost like I forgot butterflies, and then I was like, oh yeah, butterflies.
It's always brimstone for me. Every single year is the first one. I don't actually. No, it is the first one that I see because they stand out a lot as well. You can see them from about 20, 30 foot away sometimes.
Yeah, they're huge, and it's like a highlighter pen yellow. It's a really cool colour.
Yeah, it is. I really like them. Is that my sign that spring is here?
Yeah.
It's nice.
Well,
okay. Well, nature news. What you got, Nads? Well, do you want to go first?
I'm gonna open with an easy one. This is just this is nature. Do you know what this is? Nature news, but We'll see. There is this company in Texas, and they're a genetics company, and their job is they're called Colossal, and they raised hundreds of millions of dollars in an effort to de-extinct the woolly mammoth. And they have claimed a breakthrough in its quest and in the creation of hairier mice. And honestly, the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because it is the cute. They have produced this woolly mouse.
Oh, did not see that being the angle.
And I think everyone should just go and have a look.
If it's not a mouse with tusks, I don't want to know.
It's oh man, it's not. It's a woolly mouse though. It's a woolly mouse. And basically, it's an article in Nature, and if you do read it, it really, it's not what you think. This isn't the breakthrough. We're not creating woolly mammoth, but go and read this article. It's basically gene editing. For the biologists out there, you understand when you play around with genes. They found this gene in woolly mammoth that does affect hair. They've put the editing into a mouse, and it's really woolly, and it's really, really cute.
I'm really hoping in 5 years' time, they say, like, we've got a big breakthrough, and there's just a picture of an elephant in a wig.
Yeah.
That's
like
what
a
I
little
want.
toupee.
That's all I want. Yeah, like a toupee. Like, on top.
I'm going to put this link in the chat for you, so at your leisure you can have a look at the woolly, and obviously share with our listeners so they can read the article as well.
Absolutely. We'll put it on the gram. It'll be on there. I'm going to share a very quick bit of an update. Kind of, we were talking about Rosebank and Jackdaw, the two oil fields in the North Shores surrounding the UK. That was in our Nature News a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about there being a breakthrough on the what's the court called? Is it just called the courts?
Yeah, High Court.
Is that what it was?
It's the
High Court, which ruled them unlawful. Those two oil fields, or the extraction of oil from there. And a few days ago, as we record this now, the Labour government have committed to no new licensing of oil and gas in those waters and that areas. To commit in going forward in a more greener kind of sustainable way. It does mean there is a bit of fine print there in the Guardian article. Sorry, that does say it. There are rumours that it would be allowed for current licenses to expand, so they could get bigger. But there's no new licenses being granted. So that's a wee bit of an update there for you. The Guardian link is in the write-up of this episode, so if you want to be a bit more clued up. But it is very good news. Big climate win.
A big climate win.
Yeah.
All right, Labour, we're watching you. We're seeing your green moves.
We're watching you. We're enjoying it.
Let's see what comes.
What comes next? What you got now? You got another little
I think it's another really nice win. This is the news, which is the Lewis County Council are pioneering a way forward for the River Ouse to have a rights of river, which is kind of like a landmark movement in England, in the UK. This is something that exists in other countries like Canada and New Zealand, but it's this new kind of like system of thought, which is where we care for the intrinsic value of nature for its own sake, rather than what it can be owned or what it can be produced. And there's a big movement around the world to be like, nature needs to not be about like ecosystem services or capital value, or but actually the rights of these things to exist. So this approach has been
really cool.
It's really, really cool. So the Lewis District Council has worked with the this kind of ooze community group, as well as Adura River Trust, Sussex Wildlife Trust, and passed the motion that the council acknowledges the growing global movement of rights of nature as a framework for rethinking its relationship to the environment. What this ultimately means is there's going to be a whole series of actions that the council is going to take now seriously, recognising that it has a right to be free from pollution. It has a right to be home for wildlife. So there is a full charter. If you look at the Charter for the Rights of the River Ouse online, you can read it. This is like a first. And it's one to watch to see if other councils follow and we start respecting and caring for the rights of nature.
Is this a local council thing? This isn't like a law or anything like this. This is just like kind of local regulation.
So the local council actually have been in talks with various stakeholders and community. This is something we always talk about, Ryan. It's been 2 years of working with the community, getting people on board, community group bringing the issue up, coming to an agreement after like lots of working with each other. The council is like, okay, they're going to start putting things in motion that will treat the river in such a way that as though it has rights. And so it's one of these things where sometimes things have to be tried in practice before it can be like a legal template that we use across the country. So it is a landmark moment, and it is a significant step towards recognizing that way of thinking. It's not for extraction, but it has intrinsic rights of itself to be protected, and it's not about who owns it or what owns it, and it's not about ownership. So yeah, there we go. It doesn't mean rights is in the terms of like it's a legal right, but it's that use of that, like the rights of the river.
But I think this is almost, I hope this sounds right. This is almost more powerful and a bit better personally for me, because I think, when we do, it shows a couple of things. One, that, even though you've had your vote, you can still, as you always say, you can use your voice. It doesn't end with the tick in the box when you vote. You can still use your voice at your council and, get motions moving and forward. But the other thing is, when we do vote locally. We don't vote for a leader as such. That's how our system works. So in a way, when we keep it local like this and manage things like, the protection and the rights of a river, what might work or be necessary down here in South is going to be maybe totally different than what is needed up where you are in the Isle of Bute. So actually having a bog standard rule of law across the whole of the UK might not actually be the best way forward. It might be better to keep it in that local kind of council.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the government just passes a law saying everything's got rights, but people that live locally on the river could still disrespect it. But this is the other way around, which is.
But this is so.
It's
Yeah,
like
it's
the
so
community.
much.
Everyone's come together and go, no, we're going to look. So actually, it's likely that the reality is, which river is going to have more people love it. And this version of events where everyone's decided this is what they want to love it back to health. Love that.
Yeah.
Yay.
Oh, it's just so warm and lovely, isn't it?
Start one for the Thames. Thames has got plenty of people that love it.
It's a lot of people. I think we'd have to split it up.
Yeah.
Hey nerds, sorry to interrupt the show, it's Ryan here. I just wanted to pop on to tell you something quick. We always want Into the Wild to be a free and accessible show, but it does cost to run this thing. So if you ever have any spare pennies or pounds and you want to chuck it towards your favourite nature, wildlife and conservation podcast, then you can do so by going to www.ko-fi.com/intothewildpod. The link is in the write-up of this episode. Anything you're able to give goes straight back into the shows we produce. Anyway, I'll shut up now. Back onto nature news.
Go on then. What have you got?
Okay, so my one's a bit it's a bit heavy, and I think it's, I know you and I have discussed it off record on the podcast, and I've spoken about it with a few people. There was an article in the Guardian. This is actually back in Feb, so it's a wee bit old, but I wanted to bring it up because it's probably going to be spoken about again, and it will keep coming up over this year, I think, across different areas. But there was an article in the Guardian back in February that had the headline of WWF helping to facilitate trade in polar bear fur investigation reveals. The article was written by a man called Adam Cruz, and the article kind of really, like, to put it in slang terms, calls out WWF, saying that they, are facilitating and helping the trade of polar bear fur. Now, before Nadia and I say anything else on this, and I hope Nadia doesn't mind me saying this on her behalf, you can butt in, of course. We're not fans of WWF anyway, and this is like one of the least of the reasons that I have problems with WWF.
Yeah.
So I didn't need this article for me to go, WWF are gross. And if anything, this article doesn't instill that view in any way, shape or form. So in order for us to understand what's going on here now, WWF's stance on sustainable use hunting and the commercial trade of animal parts is basically, if it's not a threat to polar bears or the species, whatever we're talking about, and it's supporting communities, local communities and indigenous communities, then they say it's kind of fine. They don't lobby for it, they don't keep it going, but they just don't campaign to stop it because they recognise X, Y, and Z. We've got to understand a couple more things. One, polar bear are listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List. They're also listed as Appendix 2 in CITES, which means there are some restrictions on trade, but it's quite open, and there are campaigns to put them up to Appendix 1. Now, I didn't really know what that difference was, Nadia, and I was like, what does it mean if a species goes to Appendix 1? Can it still be hunted? For example, could trophy hunting still continue? Could own use still continue? Can it be traded? I didn't know what it meant. So I did a bit of research and I spoke to some people that work very closely with CITES, and I found this out basically. If an animal goes to Appendix 1, well, to put the polar bear, if they successfully got polar bears moved to Appendix 1 for CITES, then they would not be allowed to be traded on the commercial market. It'd be very hard for that to happen. However, they can still be hunted because, as we know, CITES is about trade, not about hunting as such. So trophy hunting, for example, could still continue. Now, it depends what countries want to do. So, for example, if an English trophy hunter wanted to go to Canada and hunt a polar bear, at this current time, with our laws in place, that hunter could do and import that hair and fur
So
or
he can have
whatever
his
it was
little rug
back into the UK.
in front of his
Yeah.
fire in Hampshire.
Canada, exactly. Canada allows the export. England allows the import. So that could happen. There are other countries that have different rules, so it could be different from that. They wouldn't allowed to sell it on to anyone else or anywhere. That would be against, because it would be in Appendix 1. We know this happens because black rhino are on Appendix 1, and Namibia, as an example, are quoted to use 5 black rhino a year for trophy hunting. I will say they never use them, but they are
Right.
there if they ever want to use them. It is legal to do, and it has happened in the last 20 years once, I think. But they don't ever use them. So we do know that is a thing. And there are other species. White rhino were on Appendix 1. They were trophy hunted then. They're now on Appendix 2. So it does get managed up and down. The main reason why polar bear aren't being moved up to Appendix 1 is because trade is not a reason for their vulnerable status. We know the reason why they're endangered. Habitat loss, mainly due to the climate crisis and the loss of sea ice. So we know that's the reason. That could change over the next 20 to 30 years as polar bear move to different areas, and there could be more conflicts and things could happen. But as it stands now, those are the reasons. So when I read this article, first of all, I got a bit confused because obviously I love polar bear. I don't want to think about them being hunted. I also think communities have the right to decide how their wildlife is managed, etc., etc. And in Canada, the only country left that does allow the hunting of polar bear, they do that because a lot of the areas where you do hunt polar bear are community run, Inuit run and managed. So they are having a say of what happens here. So it is a little bit more complicated. Obviously, we want to put the rules in to protect wildlife, but we have to understand, is that rule we're putting in going to actually protect wildlife? Is it going to tick the box we want it to? Are we taking something away from people that are more marginalised than we are and living in environments that are not quite as, Western and built up, and that kind of jazz.
Jazz.
It's a complicated.
It's so complicated. It's so complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated.
As you were talking, my head was ping-ponging around so much, just being like, but I know what someone would say back to that. And then they would argue this. And then they would argue this. And then they would say, yeah, but what if there was only one left? Surely we'd want to protect it and all of this. And it's just
It'd probably be on Appendix 1 and not be allowed to be hunted at that point.
Probably at that point. But then it's like, well, why are you letting them get to that point? It's just like, and then in my head I'm going, oh, no, but wait. But actually, we need these countries that are having opinions on other countries to stop their carbon emissions. In the first place, it's just
exactly.
Stop driving your whatever before you tell Frank to not go to Canada so he can have a rug next to his fire. And you tell him what other communities to do. It's so complicated, but I'm really glad. I'm really glad that you explained it for our listeners, because it's never ever straightforward. And I think ultimately always challenging that idea that we do hunt as a species. We do hunt just like other animals hunt animals.
It is a tricky one. I think one thing I would say to listeners to kind of do with stories like this is really think about how you feel about it, and then but also think of it on the side away from the animal here. So we're talking about communities, and I'm not fantasizing this term communities and indigenous people. I'm saying these communities of people do hunt polar bear. Trade does exist. These people in certain areas would like to trade these species sustainably, and that is heavily regulated in a lot of countries. Are we happy sat here in a country that is far away from there dictating how that should happen? I'm personally not happy with that.
That's not what we agree with on this podcast, I don't think.
No, that's not our vibe. So even if it is something that I'm like, oh yeah, it feels a bit gross, and I hope that turns out for the best, I'm going to take a back seat with that, because it's not really up to me. You know, I want to focus on the wildlife in my country and how that goes and the systems we have in place. So it's just sit down a bit with those kind of stories and think about how you feel about it. And, you know, remember, Inuit communities are living in an environment that is incredibly different to your environment. And resources are a lot, I would say, thinner on the ground, I would imagine, at some, depending on how people are living and stuff. So yeah, it's just kind of remembering stuff like that, really.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. We could talk about this for hours. We might do a big deep dive
God, we really could.
episode later in the year. I can see that coming.
Yeah, I think, do you know what? There's a lot of talk about different, the UK looking at banning trophy hunting imports again, and I think it is a conversation to bring back up. And I know when we were in Namibia, I think we spoke about hunting a little bit off record. It does always come up. It really does.
They are cute though.
They are. I mean, but they are adorable.
In the face, yeah.
I bet they're less adorable when you're
Face
next
to face, yeah.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing? Something like a polar bear gets less cute the closer
But you know, when
it gets.
it's just sat there drinking a bottle of Coca-Cola, you kind of you don't want to hunt it.
It's a very Christmassy image you've just popped up into my head.
The warm spell's gone up here in Scotland. So. Brilliant! Wow, that was a whistle-stop tour through.
So
everything.
there you go. I know we got through quite a few, what a range of stories.
From woolly mice to woolly bears.
So nerds, that's the end of Nature News week 7. If you haven't yet, catch up with Journey Back to Namibia episode 2, When the Rain Stops, which came out last Monday. We focus on humanising the topic of the climate crisis and talk to a farmer called Mona Lisa Siebes, who shares her experience and her feeling and emotion to do with living in a 12-year-long drought. Episode 3 of that series will be out in April. God, this year's snapping by, isn't it? Whizzing by. If you're not, don't forget to follow us on social media, Blue Sky, Twitter and Instagram. We don't really tweet, but we do release episodes on there. And if you've got any spare pennies, pounds, whatever it is, and you want to throw it towards your favourite nature podcast, you can do so at ko-fi.com/Into the Wild Pod. All the links for that kind of stuff is in the write-up of this episode, as is all the links to the topics we've spoken about today. But until next time, nerds, enjoy your week, and we'll speak to you soon.
Bye.